Hi, Jodi. Welcome to the show.
Hi,
Uh,
thank you for having me.
Jodi Rose is an art therapist and is here to talk about how art can help parents connect with their children on a deeper level. Before
Mhm.
we go into the details, could you share a bit about your personal journey and the healing methods that have evolved from it?
Sure. I grew up in a very creative family. My mother and my grandmother were makers, and I just found that creativity was always a natural language for me. In my late teens, I had some mental health issues, and I was exposed to art therapy, and it was so powerful. I look back at that period of my life as such a gift, in part because I was introduced to art therapy and just a whole new way of understanding creativity, not just for the technical aspects or for the joy of making, but as just a wonderful resource for self-expression and getting to know yourself better. Art therapy has been transformative in my life, and at a certain point in my life, I wanted to give back, and so went to graduate school to become an art therapist. I've since worked in different types of settings. I work with children, primarily those who are on the autism spectrum or who have a history of trauma. I think that art has a really beautiful bridge for parent and child because it can really help with child development, and it's beneficial for the parent who's using it as a tool as well. And so as I should talk about creativity and art making today, we're really putting aside our ideas of trying to make a bird look like a bird or technical skills in art making. This is a completely different experience of creativity aside from what we're maybe used to thinking art making being about. So it really is more about life skills, life lessons, life as art, and just all of the learning that comes through the creative process itself.
I love that. And are we talking about drawing, just drawing, or other ways of art,
I
other
would like
types of?
to really expand in this conversation. I would really like to expand the definition of art making to include all forms of creativity. And as we move forward in our discussion, especially talking about things like mind-body connection, I'll be sharing a lot of different types of ways to um, enjoy creative processes in ways that are beneficial for development and mental health. So we're going to think, and I'll give examples when we get there, but we're going to think much more broadly than painting and drawing. So if people don't paint and draw, no problem. You can still benefit from therapeutic art making with your child.
Awesome. So I know there are a lot of applications, as you already mentioned. I know one of them is to assist children in self-regulation through
Mhm.
art. Could
Yes.
you give us some examples of how parents can use that? What
Yes,
strategies?
absolutely. So one way that art therapists think about art making, art materials, and self-regulation is using materials strategically and prescriptively. I know that sounds really fancy, but I think like the day-to-day experience of this is a child who is not well regulated getting into paint, and now there's paint on the floor and all over the kitchen, on the ceiling. Like it's like the behavior action, like it just starts to splatter with the material, right? So we can use things for children that are having difficulty with self-regulation, doing things that are not as what we would call movable. So things like marker and colored pencil, giving them more controlled materials so that they're successful in creating something with it and managing their behavior while using those materials. So definitely using things like marker, watercolor, even collage is really great. Clay that's not too like wet or sticky. And then thinking about size as well. So smaller size is literally more contained and more controllable. But sometimes people think, especially when we're talking about doing artwork about emotions, big emotion, let's make a big artwork. Actually, I wouldn't recommend that because that can be very triggering for the child with the big emotion. That can feel uncontrollable. Thinking about materials and size are two great ways to have an entry point into self-regulation. There's so much opportunity for parents to model life skills as related to self-regulation. So that's things, that help teach the child about responsibility and task completion. So that might be like, let's talk about how to break this project into smaller parts. Let's talk about making lists of materials and supplies. So sometimes when I work with the youth client and we decide the project that they're going to work on multi-weeks, I just kind of say, well, what are the steps? How will we break that down? And so like I help them start to think through breaking a big task into a small task. What supplies do we need? When do we need it? And I let them take the lead and the ownership on that. Also, just doing things like staging your supplies, managing time well, saying, okay, try to finish in the next 10 minutes. So giving them a container within which to work and being very clear about the expectations, like this is when we'll be stopping. Cleanup, taking responsibility for washing brushes or putting tape back in the drawer, and then task completion. It's so easy to have 20 pieces that are half done, but if we really focus on structure and completing the task and having a big celebration around it, these are many indirect but very powerful ways that we can improve self-regulation. There are probably, from a brain standpoint as well, as we talk about the mind-body connection, even more ways that we can talk about self-regulation, because outside of painting and drawing, there are so many different materials that have tactile qualities or that are soothing. So that's very calming on the nervous system. The nervous system has two parts, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. And the parasympathetic is what's responsible for rest and digest. So that's the calming. That's the calming stuff. So that's another self-regulation aspect, is using the materials and the sensory quality of the materials for self-soothing and calmness for the anxious child. So a couple of levels of answers there. There's a lot.
Yeah. When we have a dysregulated child, how do we approach the situation? For example, here are the tools that you need. Go ahead and express yourself, or we give them some kind of prompt, some way to guide them into the process.
It would depend on how the dysregulation is showing up. I would probably get them into the body first, even if it's doing jumping jacks or going for a walk. Here, I might use materials that, like, let's go outside. Let's involve all five senses. Again, that's the sensory aspect. Making a sandcastle, doing a mandala out of flower petals. So again, if we gather natural materials, they're interacting with the materials. They can hear the sounds of outside. They're feeling the grass against their legs as they're bending down and working on a piece. So these are ways that children who are seriously dysregulated, getting them in the body and experiencing as many senses as possible. When a child is dysregulated, the low back part of the brain is more active, right? On some level, there's emotionality, just difficulty managing oneself. And so when this low back part is overstimulated, it's difficult for the upper front, the part that's more responsible for self-awareness. It's difficult for that to come online. So if a child is dysregulated, to sit down and make art about how they feel, that's a pretty big leap. That might not even be possible, depending on why they're dysregulated or, what's happening. I think always getting it, we call it bottom up treatment interventions, like always starting with something sensory or soothing or in the physical body is just so highly recommended.
And then how do they express those feelings that they might struggle to articulate otherwise verbally? How is art helping in that?
We've heard the saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And so if a child is wanting to express something that happened and they don't have the words for it, they can draw a picture and describe the picture. They can also do abstract artwork, just using line and color to represent how they're feeling. I call these mood doodles, and I start almost every session with them. What color is happy? What color is sad? What is anger? Is that line more jagged? is calm, smoother. Each child develops their own sort of language or symbolism that's unique to expressing their day. Just doing an image about their day, or something that they can describe more directly, is so helpful. It's just easier to talk about an experience when it's out here, as opposed to, especially for children that struggle maybe with perfectionism, they shut down if they can't think of the right words to say. When the attention is out here on the artwork instead of right in your face with the parent looking at you, it's just easier. And the image holds the words and helps the child to find the words.
We still ask questions based on the picture, but the focus is on the picture, not on the child itself.
Yeah. And I would recommend being curious. Just tell me more. Try not to interpret the artwork ever. I think whatever they make, whether it's for fun or as an emotional outlet, to just be curious and tell me more and help me understand what this is about, and they'll find the words.
Do you think we should praise kids' pictures? Like when they come to us and say, "Mommy, do you like this picture?" Because I've heard two different opinions. One is just describe what you see without, "I love it, what a great picture," because you don't want them to look for praise. What's your opinion on that?
I think be authentic. I totally understand the side of like not wanting to condition for praise or anything like that. But I mean, sometimes people show up with artwork and it's genuinely like, wow, that's amazing. That's an art explosion. That was so creative how you thought to do it that way. I think if you have that like genuine response, it's okay to express that. But maybe a middle ground would be to say, wow, this is an interesting piece. What do you think worked well here? What was a struggle? Did you have a struggle in this piece? So I think like digging into the piece and their process as they were making, like being curious about that, and then just reinforcing it, almost like an objective art critique, really, right? Like there are things that worked here probably and things that didn't. So let's talk about that.
Okay. It's not just, okay, that's a great picture and move on. We show more interest into the whole process.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Some kids are really introverted. So you say that art can be used as a prompt to give them space to tell us what's going on in their minds. What are some prompts parents can use to start an open conversation with those
Yeah,
kids?
I love this. You can turn anything into a prompt. You can buy little conversation card decks. Those are popular. They're just little conversation starters, like what is your happiest memory? Or what is something you're afraid of? And then just have them draw that and then talk about the drawing. Even a word of the day. So if you could summarize today in a word, what would it be? And then make a drawing about that. And just taking feelings, draw something that makes you anxious, draw something that makes you sad, and then adding, and how do you feel? How do you notice that in the physical body? So that's another way that you can combine art prompts and also introspection, like the mind-body connection, helping them develop an understanding of what their physical cues are when they have an emotion.
I love that. I've lost it. I have a friend that asked me, okay, you feel fear. Where do you feel it? In your tummy, in your chest? And I'm like, I don't know. So is art therapy a way to come back to this connection?
Yes, absolutely. And that's, I mean, what wonderful prompts to do with your child, because stick figures are fine. Having a little mark over a throat, like it's hard to talk because they're nervous, or feeling a weight on the chest, or a sense of expansion. Just the humblest of little doodles are really more than enough to start the conversation. And then you can model that. Sometimes it's hard too, sometimes it's not so hard. And just even doing that as a way of processing the day is just a wonderful thing that you can do. I'm a nature-based artist, so I'm going to suggest using nature often because it's hopefully accessible to people, and it's accessible to parents who maybe are less comfortable with drawing. But even finding an object in nature and just writing a poem about it, or why was this interesting to you today? And then, doing a little drawing about it or a story about it. These are wonderful ways to help them be present in the world and experience the world and communicate their experience.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And it could be a great way to have a bonding experience with your child, creating art together.
Mhm.
Have you encountered any resistance from parents who may not see themselves as creative? Like, how do you encourage them to embrace the experience of creating art?
I love this topic. And I just want to say we definitely want to avoid isolating a child, especially if they're like the only child in the family who's what would be considered the creative, because they can intake that personal story that they're different or that they don't fit in, and that can follow them for life. So I mean, if you feel like you're not creative, this is an awesome opportunity to model humility and a whole bunch of different things. So just draw with your child. You can just Google drawing cartoons, or there's all sorts of YouTube videos. And you know what? Just model humility. Model that you don't have to be the best at something. Model that you're willing to try something new. Watch your own self-talk. It's so easy to put yourself down or to say, I'm not this. So watch that and instead model growth mindset. Like, even though I'm so admittedly not the best artist in the world, this is fun to do something new. Or even though this drawing didn't turn out quite the way it's supposed to, I liked this part. This is just such a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for you to practice mindfulness and to model mindfulness for your child. And let them show you how to draw something if they have mastery or if they just learned something. Sometimes they'll learn in school how to draw a face or a bird. Let them show you and practice along with them and make a big deal. Celebrate their strengths as an artist and let your non-creativity be your strength. I think that families in which everyone's creative, sometimes that can fall into competition. Sometimes creativity becomes over intellectualized or it becomes too technical. So when all of that's happening, creativity almost could be traumatic for a child because the fun is taken away.
Mhm.
Competition, intellect, technique. If you're not creative, you have the opportunity to model the growth mindset, to be adventurous and curious and explore different materials and keep the fun in it. So just celebrate your strengths as a non-creative parent, as you encourage your creative child.
I find myself a not so creative parent, and I even find it counterproductive when I engage in an activity like that. I get agitated because it's not
Mm,
happening the way I want it to happen.
yeah.
So I'm just shutting down. I'm not participating in any creative events. And my three girls love, love, love all creative projects like using the glue, the scissors, drawing,
Mhm,
painting, everything. And I'm
mhm.
just, okay, leave me out of it. So I have a lot to learn from you.
Uh-huh. Well, I think that how people react to materials, how they roll in art, can be how they roll in life. And so really watch the self-talk piece and the shutting down piece with your children at a certain point when they start to suddenly they're putting their artwork down. This is terrible. Or they're comparing it to someone else. They're probably doing that for themselves too. And likewise, it's easy for you to shut down in materials, just again, modeling that you have the resilience to overcome that, or to have boundaries. I am able to do this much, but not this. And we all agree to disagree on our creative skills, but hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Okay, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that explanation. Jodi, I always ask my guests these two questions. Firstly, is there a book you genuinely appreciate and would recommend to any parent? A book that could influence their approach to parenting. It doesn't have to be strictly about parenting,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
something that you believe would make them better parents.
I definitely recommend Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score. It talks about the mind-body connection through the lens of neuroscience, and it's an accessible book. It's got wonderful case studies, and there's a wonderful chapter on children and trauma recovery. So particularly if you are a family that has gone through sustained chronic stress or traumatic experiences, it's a wonderful book.
Okay, thank you. I've heard of it, I haven't read it, so I'll add it to my list.
Yeah.
And secondly, if you had the opportunity to speak to moms globally and share one piece of parenting advice, what would that be?
I think like letting them speak their emotions through their art without interpreting it, and letting their interpretation of the art be theirs, to be curious, to create a safe space for them to make art about their emotions. And part of that safe space is to, again, not putting down your own artwork, being curious and celebratory about what they're making, honoring that not every piece needs to make it to the refrigerator door or even be finished, just allowing their sketchbook and their art world a neutral place for them to be, to figure it out, because it's a natural place for them to figure it out. And sometimes some might look at an artwork and go, whoa, and get kind of freaked out about what's going on in here. But if they're working it out on paper versus through behavior, great. Right.
Yeah,
And so,
that's a great vehicle. So in general, we don't give opinion about our kids' art. Sometimes I'm in a situation when my girl is asking, Mommy, do you like my painting? And I really don't, but I don't want to put her down.
well, I think in that case, like falling back on the tell me about this piece, and refraining from an opinion if you don't like it. If that's probably not going to be productive. You could say, well, I'm not a fan of hot pink and brown together, but tell me about this. So you could still be honest. You could still say, I love this area. Look at the way these brush strokes turned out. So maybe it's
Okay,
less
great
about
point. Just find something you like and compliment that part.
yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Okay.
then, going back to what worked about this for you. Was there any part that you had a challenge in this? And just, again, be more conversational about the entire piece, because more than just the outcome, that finished product, go into what the process was like.
Hmm. Okay, focus on the process. Well,
Yes.
thank you for this enlightening conversation, Jodi. I really enjoyed our chat. Please tell people how can they learn more from you and get in touch.
Sure. You're very welcome. I've enjoyed the conversation as well. I have resources at jodirosestudio.com. So that's JODI rosestudio.com. And for adults and for general self-care using art-based mindfulness, I have numerous programs that are available there, from free to a spotlight course that talks about how to develop your own creative practice, to a more in-depth 6-week program. But I really wanted to share a resource it's called stridecreativedc.com. And this is a program partnership I have with our local United Way office. United Way here in the US is a nationwide program. They're a social services organization that supports numerous community initiatives. So through my partnership with United Way locally, we have a program called Stride Creative. And on Stride Creative, we have an on-demand program called Mighty Teens Empowerment, but it's actually wonderful for like the 12-year-old under, the preteens. It's 9 modules. It's a free program, and it's focused on growth mindset, emotional safety, and resilience building, all through doing very simple drawing prompts. So this is a great resource. It's free. Anyone in the world can take it. It's on demand. And it's just a great way to explore some of the things that we talked about. You have the drawing prompts. There are also, within each module, different breathing techniques and just other tools to help a child manage stress and anxiety. But you can do the art prompt with your child and then talk about what you drew. And this is a wonderful little course that would be a great starting point for any of your listeners that have heard this interview today and are like, well, this is great. Where's the starting point? stridecreativedc.com, and then looking for the Mighty Teens program. It's free and it's a great resource.
That's an awesome resource. I'll check it out for my preteen.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll add it to the show notes so people can check it out.
Okay. Yeah, wonderful. It really, especially for the non-creative parent, because it's not about the final outcome of an art piece. It's just a simple doodle or drawing and then talking about it and exploring these wellness concepts. But it does so in a language that's really more natural for the children that are that age.
Amazing. Thank you.